Generosity is a really, really key feature of the business I run. Generous towards ourselves, taking care of our health, taking care of each other. In business, in life, is the battle between structure and flow. And how do you have enough structure so that you can flow, but not too much so that you're stifled? In these times, you need to be agile, you need to be able to pivot and do things quickly and change. A leader has to be very attuned to their intuition. And then they also have to have good people around them who are also tuned to their intuition. Solvitur ambulando, which means by walking, it is solved. It all feeds into your contemplation and it helps you decide what's true. And to contemplate means not just to think deeply, it means to really listen to life, to yourself, to your body, to each other. In my book on contemplation, I call this the mind of light. And the mind of light is when it soars on the wings of the heart. So the heart opens, love returns, you heal your traumas from your childhood, your wounds, and then the mind opens up and it starts to perceive the kind of multidimensional nature of the universe. But you've got to slow down, you've got to be a contemplative person. Otherwise, how are you ever going to get to the wisdom that's inside you? I mean, that's what all my work, the Gene Keys and the Sage, all about. Its only purpose is to slow people down enough so that they remember their own wisdom.
Welcome to another episode of the Conscious 500 podcast. My name is Mark van Heijden. I'm the founder of Conscious 500. And today we're sitting here in this beautiful natural environment in Devon, invited by Richard Rudd from the Gene Keys, because initially the idea was to do this online, and then I realized it's so much better in real life. So I said, can we do this at the exact same time as the online call, but then somewhere where it fits you? And he recommended this amazing place here in Devon next to the River Dart behind us. And I'm already so grateful that I can experience this. And I'm really looking forward to welcome you to this episode. And let's kick it off. So welcome, Richard. Thank you for being here.
Lovely to be here. Thank you.
Pretty close from your hometown. This is a natural habitat for you.
Very kind of you to visit me here, just 10 minutes from where I live. It's wonderful. Yeah,
Yeah, it was worth the adventure to come here and to especially to be here, because I feel already so nourished by nature and the conversation and the walk we had together. And yeah, I just want to take a little moment to share my gratitude to you for being here with us at the Conscious 500 podcast. And for the people that still haven't heard about the Gene Keys, besides the fact that they can look it up online, I know that, for example, Mike Tyson loves the Gene Keys, and there are quite a few other bigger names like Rick Rubin who have been acknowledging your work. And I'm curious if you can share a little bit about it without going too deep into the same story that you've told a lot of times, because I want to go more to the new stuff and talk about also conscious business and leadership. But you can give a little sprinkle, it would be really nice.
Sure, I'll do my best. It's kind of like a technology of consciousness, of higher consciousness, the Gene Keys. So it's based on the code of life, the 64-fold code of life, and it's the I Ching, the DNA. That's why it's called Gene Keys. And it's this notion that we're kind of a holographic being, and that everything that we live inside of is holographic. It's like the ancients always said, as above, so below. And so there's this, it's a body of wisdom that helps us understand our place in the hologram, the romantic hologram of existence. And so it allows you to see your coding, your specific codings, your pathways, your archetypes, your mythology, your pathology, your difficulties, your challenges, and understand them in a higher light. So it helps people essentially kind of come to terms with the shadow patterns in our nature, and to transform those shadow patterns into gifts. And that's really the essence of it. And so it is a whole language that's taken many years to develop. It's very intricate. It's quite complex in its scope and its breadth, but it's very simple in its essence. It's really saying the same thing over and over again in lots of different languages and ways. But it's very applicable to everyone in whatever sphere of life you move through, because we all have shadows, difficulties, and we would all like to live a wider, happier, more relatable life, a spiritual life as well. And really, so inside every gene key of the 64 of them are 3 words, and that is the fundamental sort of language patterning of the gene keys. And those 3 words are a shadow word, a gift word, and what I call a siddhi, which is like a Sanskrit word. It means an essence, divine essence. So you can look at your own life through the lens of any of those patterns. And the book I wrote, which is, back some years ago now, 2009, it came out, that gives people the language that they can explore. And it can also be individualized to you through a profiling system. So you can look and see, this is where these are my particular codes in the bigger matrix. So it enables you to really understand a very dialed, transformational language to help you with whatever you're tackling in your everyday life, and to elevate your consciousness to its highest capacities. So it really gives you, ultimately, a view of yourself that is, this is what I look like at my highest, at my zenith. This is what the divine Richard looks like. This is what the shitty Richard looks like through the shadow lenses, and then this is what the divine Richard looks like, and then it gives you a language of how you can get there. Simple.
I discovered Gene Keys about 9-10 years ago and been really going deep into it and applying it in different ways. Exactly what you said, as a mirror, as another perspective in my own consciousness and in my own journey as a conscious leader, which is always ever developing. And you mentioned that it's designed to elevate consciousness on the highest level, and the mission of Conscious 500 is to elevate business for good. So I feel there's a lot of synergies. That's why also we invited you and for the podcast, because the goal really is to create different mirrors and have different tools and practices and community around us as leaders individually to become aware of how we are leading. And so can you tap in a little bit on that, of from the shadows and leadership that we are seeing in the world right now, how do you see that could shift into these higher states, and what does it mean also in a grounded way? Because I think for some people, higher states could also sound a little bit like woo-woo, very spiritual. And I think it's as above, so below, like you said in the beginning. So if you could tap into that a little bit.
Yeah. I think, leadership is a big subject. A lot of people, a lot of experts out there. I think that everyone can see quite clearly that a lot of the leadership paradigms that we see around us in the world are very old school. We've inherited them from, our ancestry, and they are, to use that word that everyone uses, patriarchal. They are quite patriarchal and hierarchical, and there's nothing wrong with hierarchy at one level. But if it's not balanced, because it's vertical hierarchy, right? And its opposite is heterarchy, which is the horizontal, which is where everyone kind of works together in a synergy, right? But then if you had only a heterarchy, and we see this, like only a heterarchy without any clear leaders, it's also a mess, right? So, and then hierarchy is a mess as well on its own, because you get people who are just pushed down and you get people who are in control, and if they're the wrong people, then you get a disaster of inequality. So the two together are what I feel makes a really good leader. Someone that understands both layers, and in a way, I would suggest that the perfect balance also tips not in the middle, it tips more over towards heterarchy, which is, you could say, is the more feminine of the two. I don't mean feminine female, I mean it's the most yin, it's the receptive one, because it's about working collectively and listening. So the leader is primarily a good listener. That is a real key to true leadership. But sometimes the leader also needs a bit of warrior energy, because otherwise this soup of listening to everyone and, it's like if it doesn't have a bit of forward momentum or a bit of a push or a bit of a challenge or, then it flounders. So you need sometimes a little bit of that hierarchy needs to rise up when it's needed. Sometimes it's needed as defense as well. And then it sinks back down into the heterarchy. And so it's a wave that you can call upon when you need it. So a good leader has elements of both, I would say, a balanced leader, but also is mostly on the spectrum of the receptive, the listening, the communication is massively important in leadership, obviously. So I don't know if that kind of starts a good, interesting conversation, but it's sort of one take.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I love it. It's also related to the best artists are also the best listeners, and there is no music without silence. And again, it's this rebalancing of the energies within ourselves, of this masculine, feminine energies, this kind of kundalini sacred marriage within. And but I'm curious, like, why is it then a little bit more leaning towards the feminine side? Is it because of this, I think in the beginning we talked about, from around 1800s that the patriarchy was kind of rising. Is it part of that rebalancing that we need to hang a little bit more on the feminine side, or is it, what's the...
I think it's basically just because women are wiser.
Yeah.
It's because the feminine, is like in the true balance of the cosmos. In the work I do with the Gene Keys, which is based on the I Ching. The I Ching is an ancient Chinese text, really interesting, made up of these symbols, 64 of them, and they map to DNA. They map to the 64 codons in our genetic code, mathematically, really beautifully. But the very first two symbols, they are the prime feminine and the prime masculine. And in the original I Ching, the ones that we've inherited, this sacred book from China, 5,000 years old, the first one is always it's called heaven, and the second one is earth, right? So the first one is the masculine, the second is the feminine. And I discovered that in very ancient manuscripts, it wasn't that way. It wasn't always that way, that originally the feminine was placed first, because the feminine is the pure yin, it's the void out of which comes the creative masculine. It doesn't mean that men are more creative than women or anything like that. It's just the yin and the yang. And so the yin is the field. That's actually the original translation of that code. It's the field out of which the creative spirit arises. So it is naturally first. And things in a balance is rarely 50-50 in the universe. Like, look into the universe, look into nature. It's rarely 50-50. It's often tilted. And so I often think that the balance of, benevolence and, let's say, destructiveness, entropy, if that was 50-50, I don't think we'd be here. If it wasn't tilted towards benevolence, I don't think the spiral of life would have continued. It would have destroyed itself. And so the mystics and the ancients have always said, the Kabbalists, the people have always said that the good or the benevolent it's always tilted. Life is tilted, or evolution is tilted in the favor of the benevolent. So it's kind of, the game is rigged, if you know what I mean. And I think that's why, as a parent as well, as a dad, I have learned that lesson the hard way, that you can impose like really rigid structure on your kids, or you can be really loose with your boundaries, and I've been both. I've seen parents who are both. And what I've learned, and what I learned especially from my wife over time working together, was that if you tilt towards the less boundaries, you have a better life and the kids have a better life. So if you overimpose structure, it's not 50-50. It's more like maybe 75-25 or so. So you have a little bit of structure, just enough, but then most of the time it's flow, it's learning, it's listening, it's the feminine, it's the softness, it's mildness. because that's the environment that we thrive in, actually. But you need that little bit of structure when it's needed in order to hold so that the child feels safe, actually, and boundaries. So parents with no boundaries at all, you end up with kids who really, in their basic being, don't feel safe. They may feel very free, but actually, I'm not sure a child needs that. They feel free with boundaries, with good boundaries. That helps them feel more free. It's like, well, I guess that's what I've learned from being a father. And I try and apply that to my life as well, like to yield more than I kind of, defend, or to soften rather than, clench. And I think that's when that's become the center of my life and my teachings of the Gene Keys. That is a core principle, is gentleness, actually. Yeah. Universal principle.
Yeah, powerful. Thank you for sharing. And I feel like the parenthood is also another form of leadership, because sometimes people think, oh, conscious leadership, that's when you're at the company or when you're working on the business and you're always a leader, and then you can choose how to show up in different ways, in different capacities. So if you would bridge that leadership that you are practicing with your wife and your children in how you are leading Gene Keys, like what are patterns you've seen, maybe some shadows in yourself as a leader of the company, and how you've transformed them into your own cities, and so we can learn from you as the one who's leading this company as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think in my business, I've leaned at times too far on the receptive, right? So I've been over generous with my time, with my funds, with everything. That's something I have learned. I've gone too. I mean, I think in a way, being over generous is safer than being less so. But it also has its problems. It's like then you create an environment that is also, it comes back to haunt you in some way. So generosity is a really, really key feature of the business I run, and I really, and I apply it as a term, and I think we all members of the business apply it as a term that is kind of used on every level: generous towards ourselves, taking care of our health, taking care of each other. Really, when difficulties come up, leaning towards the, how can we resolve this peacefully? How can we, leaning into those, we call it our noble code. I wrote a beautiful document, I think, called a noble code, which is like 10 principles that we kind of invite ourselves to kind of try and hold ourselves to, and in those principles also are included like principles of what happens when things go wrong in relationships, like principles of how to address, forgiveness and repair of relationship, and how to, lean towards the other. And, sometimes it's a very challenging thing to live up to. And that's a constant battle, I think, in business, in life, is the battle between structure and flow. And how do you have enough structure so that you can flow, but not too much so that you're stifled? And I think, in the last few years, I realized that the business that I kind of grew up through, because it was organic, had too much structure, and it was a little bit throttled by the structure. And so we brought in new people gradually, and we worked to loosen that structure. And some things we had to make firmer, and other things, like our contracts, for example, we actually looked at them and thought, these are not fit for purpose. They were created from, when the business was a little tiny village, and as I said to you, I was sitting in my pajamas online, and just fiddling around, and Gene Keys was growing. And then, so we had to like tighten up certain areas and loosen other areas. And you know what it's like. Businesses, when they have to keep growing, they keep changing, and because life is changing. And I found personally running a business the most challenging spiritual thing I've ever had to do. I was never intending to run it either. I wanted someone else to do that. But then I realized, circumstances kind of delivered me this teaching in such a way that I kind of had to take over the business. And then I had to learn about business, and I had to learn on the job and apply all my teachings as best I could into the business world, which is a tricky world, because it's riddled with, old paradigm kind of energies and paradoxes and incredible challenges. And yeah, I've had to rethink everything, my whole philosophy, like coming to like legal contracts. I'm like, gosh, dude, the legal language. Like, I'm a linguist. I'm a lover of poetry. And then when I look at like legal language or business language, it's like, to me, it's just ugly, actually. It's ugly. It's unnecessary. It's not gracious. It's all the things I hate. And yet it's a part of the system that we are sort of, we haven't changed yet. So I have to live with it. And I've had to learn to sort of bend and make the best of it. But at times it's been painful. Business for a soft-hearted, spiritual person like me, that's been a tough teaching. But, tough teachings also make you stronger. So it's given me a lot, and I've learned hugely from the team of people I work with, and I now work with a lot of professionals. Originally, I worked with a lot of spiritual people, and I joked with you earlier. I said, like, my advice to anyone who wants to run an easy business is don't hire spiritual people, because those are the people that are the most entrenched in their views, and could be, spirituality and business have a difficult marriage. And those people are quite rebellious as well, naturally, which is wonderful. And I'm joking when I say that, but there is a grain of truth to it. Like the professionals who we brought in at different times, who came from the mainstream, have actually really helped the business thrive. So it's been really interesting, like merging different whole, paradigms, different belief systems from different people who came from different backgrounds. And that in itself is like, oh my goodness, it's what a playground, or sometimes a battlefield, building and running a business can be, especially with the sort of market, out there. And it's changing, patterns, especially nowadays, where it's very difficult to adapt to, the massive changes of the world. And how can you keep your business going? And these are difficult questions. For a spiritual teacher or teachings, those are not questions that any spiritual teacher has ever had to ask before. Because they didn't have a business. They just had, they had a different kind of business. They had business where they had benefactors, mostly. And people just gave them money, and then they just ran it with a hierarchy. That's how they did it. And trying to run what I call a synarchy, which is like a balanced hierarchy, heterarchy, where there's self-empowerment, but also a kind of healthy balance. That's massively challenging. It's been the biggest edge of my life, actually, I would say. So yeah, don't attempt it, unless you're, very courageous.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. Yeah, I love the synergy. Wow, when you say the word, I can kind of see it and envision it, because I feel this time that we're in is asking for, the new story, right? And it needs, like, I think language is still one of the main things we use to communicate, and I think more people start to sense more things, but still language is also kind of encoding it and helping grounding it, embedding it into the reality. So how are you designing and experiencing the synergy inside the Gene Keys team? Like, because now you have around 40 people, if I remember well, around the world. Like,
Yeah.
how do you practically apply this perspective?
We're still very organic, and we are still, you know, we have some good structures now, but we are quite a flowing team. We're quite a flowing business, and that also is challenging, but it's needed in these times. You know, in these times, you need to be agile. You need to be able to pivot and do things quickly and change, because, you know, I don't know, like our business model for, I don't know, 10 years was based on long form online course content that we created beautiful online courses in Gene Keys. And we had like 5, 6, 7 very popular ones. And it was like a mainstay of the business. It was just always like every year, predictable. As the business grew, that held us. Like, you know, didn't make us a fortune, but it enabled us to pay each other well and grow and put some money back in and keep going. And then I guess a year ago, that kind of collapsed with, you know, the world, the changes in the world, the, you know, prices of everything changing, you know, the cost of living crisis, all of that. And people's pockets were changed, and people's priorities changed as well. And also with the rise of AI and all these other things, there's a massive flood of spiritual things out in the world. And I think people were just full as well. So we were like, suddenly our income crashed and stayed low, at like a much lower level. We were like, wow, what's happened? And so and one of the answers to your question is trusting in one's intuition. You know? And I think a leader has to be very attuned to their intuition. And then they also have to have good people around them who are also tuned to their intuition. And that doesn't mean that you're all a very floaty, intuitive group, but hopefully you are. But you've got people who are doing checks and balances around you. So I can say I've got a really strong gut instinct that we need to shift and do this. And then you have those people in your team who you trust, and they give you honest feedback. You know, and so the CFO comes in with the figures and just literally says, well, if you do this, there's the risk of this. Here are the numbers. You still want to take the risk? No. And then there's 2 or 3 others that are like also putting in, yeah. And you get this kind of, you probably get a consensus. You go, yep, I think we're going to do it. You know, so you decide together. And that's how I think decision making, you know, really important. But, you know, it has to come from the leader in the center, let's not say at the top, in the center, who's got a really strong intuition. And if someone else in the leadership team, ours is quite small, has 5 people or so, has a strong intuition the other way, you need to really listen to that, right? And that's different from a fear, you know. A fear comes in differently, it lands differently, you can feel it. But another strong intuition is different in energy. And if you have 2 intuitions meeting, clashing, you really need to pause and listen deeply, because there's something in the system that has not been processed. So I did this thing after that happened, and I thought, well, I'm going to ask AI, you know, advice just for fun. So what would you do? You know, and I explained the situation of the business. I got 40 people, and if we don't figure something out, we're not going to be able to pay those 40 people properly, and we're going to have to start losing people, and then the business is going to shrink. And so I asked AI, what would you do? You know, I mean, I had my ideas, and the team had ideas, but I just thought I'm going to do it just because that was the time I was experimenting. And AI said, analyzed all that and said, well, you need to make the Gene Keys shorter, simpler for people to understand, more digestible, easier for them to relate to, you know, lots of short form content, and it described how that should happen. And I sort of took that in. This was my own private journey. I took that in. I went for a few walks along the River Dart here with that idea. And it felt really uncomfortable in me. And then I kind of came to my revelation. And I came back to my team and I said that was thinking about this, and I said, I've decided that I think we should do the exact opposite. I said, I think we should put on the longest, most kind of extreme course online retreat we've ever done, and because that's what we do best. We do long form, deep, profound, life-changing online journeys, and they've always lasted months. Our shortest journey, we call them online retreats, is a 4-month journey, because the Gene Keys is deep stuff. It's not like, life hacking. Mm-hmm. This is like long, contemplative, transformational material that goes into your everyday life. You know this, right? So we decided to do what we call the Golden Path teachings over 18 months. I said, look, we're going to do the whole thing. The purpose, the first one is purpose, the second one is relationships and love, and the third one is prosperity. And they all roll one out of each other. They're kind of programs. So we put on this, so we told the world, right? We prepared it, we got it all ready. We said we're going to do this biggest thing. The whole of 2026 and part of 2027 as well, we're going to be running this massive program, life-changing. And we had massive sign-up to it. And it saved our business. So that's an example of like having to pivot, but then sometimes your pivot is the exact opposite of what looks like the thing you should do. And it has to come straight from your heart and from you have to go right into the source of why you're doing this in the first place and who you are as a soul and as a business. And then you go right to the basis and you go, that's what we do. This is what we want to be known for. This is, let's stay true to our values and our principles. And never mind what we think everyone needs or wants. We're going to deliver this. Anyway, so that's a good example for us. It was a very successful pivot. It's part of the story of what's going on now, but.
Yeah, really powerful, especially now in a time where I think I see so many now they call it AI slop, I think is one of the words. Yeah. And it's like, it's not this, it's that, and they're all like cloud made, same websites, same fonts, like everything looks the same. And so it feels super powerful that you explored it. And I know you're also still co-creating with AI with the Gene Keys, but like taking that time in nature to walk, to marinate, to sit with it, to take that sacred pause, to slow down, to really remember why you started and if this is in full alignment. So you found that intuition in yourself. So I'm curious, like, how do you recognize that intuition? If people that are listening, like, how do I know when it's my intuition and when is it my mind? When is it, whatever? And how did that work in the synergy again with the team? Because there was a big challenge, right? The company could have gone really far, or let's say became smaller. Yeah. People's jobs are on the line, and then you play around with this AI thing, and then you come back with, no, it's going to be the complete opposite. And then, so how, if you can combine the answer and how do you listen to that intuition, recognize it, and how did the team respond to you sharing your intuition, how that became like a shared decision?
I think the technique is the art of contemplation. And to contemplate means not just to think deeply, it means to really listen to life, to yourself, to your body, to each other, and to chew things and take time. It's about taking time. It's about deep patience, not being in a hurry. And so in order to hear what's really clear inside us, we need to take time and really live in a contemplative way if we can. Because otherwise we don't know what's true. We can't hear in the body. So you need, like, walking is wonderful. Like there's a wonderful statement by St. Augustine, who I'm not a huge fan of, but he did come up with this wonderful saying, solvitur ambulando, which means by walking, it is solved. And I love it because it's like, if you go for a long walk with a problem, so often you come back and either the problem has shifted or it's softened or you've kind of got a different view on it. But you have to not go with the sort of tension of like, I'm going to solve this problem. You just take the problem with you for a walk, right? And it's sort of a metaphor as well, because a walk might be, a week of your life just holding it in the background, but not being in a hurry, and letting it simmer, and it comes up every now and again, and you're thinking about it, and then you get another view, and you have a conversation with someone, or a wise person, or a child, or something, and then you see a dog playing, and then it all feeds into your contemplation, and it helps you decide what's true. And when it's true, it's so obviously true. You come back from that walk, however long it takes, with, like, it's in your body. It's a somatic experience, right? And you're like, I know this is what we got to do. So I came back to my team with that, and I was like, I know this is what we're going to do. And they could just see it in my eyes.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, well, we can figure out how, but yeah, you can see. And because I was impassioned, that passion kind of was picked up, and people are receptive, and we trust each other. And then you strength test the idea, and you go, well, how is it going to work? What do we do this? How will we market it? And you ask all those questions, and then you're like, oh, do we have the appetite for this risk? Who's up for it? And then you decide together, and then, off you go. My experience is that if an idea is really landed deeply inside you, then it creates a spark of delight, that everyone feeds off. And then you're like, right, we got a clear direction. And that's such a relief in a business. Even if it's like, turns out to be the wrong direction, just having a direction in a difficult time is a powerful thing to do. So, I don't know if that helps people to understand. It's very somatic, the experience. But it also needs to be collectively held. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, and I think that's the embodiment part, where you fully embody that insight, that perspective, and you feel it, you believe in it, even though it might go wrong, or I don't think there is a wrong. There are, mistakes.
Yeah.
Just learn from going in this direction, and oh wait, maybe a few degrees, the ship should go more this way. But if we would have never gone kind of in a good direction, if we stay floating on the ocean and this big wave comes, then everyone is not saying the F word.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a beautiful way, because from your embodiment, then that gives the trust as a leader for the others in the team to recognize it in themselves as well. And they can sit with it, they can go on their walks and come back, and then you have this collective energy. We were talking about this flock of birds, where the 7 neighbors, where 7 birds are all interconnected, and they feel that embodiment to move as also a synergy, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a leader also, as I said, has to be a good listener, and has to be able to yield at times as well. And so it's not like you want everyone around you to be yes people. You actually want people who will push back, who are courageous, and will just go, hang on a sec, that's kind of a great idea, but like it doesn't feel like the right time for us to be able to do that. If I'm full of a passion of an idea, it may not happen. Because then I've got like a logistics person just going, well, actually, I don't think we can make that happen this year, being quite honest. And then you have to go, okay, well, let's just shelve it. So sometimes it's not always an easy sailing either. You have to make compromises. But I think that's teamwork. A good teamwork in action is trusting each other,
Yeah, it's powerful. Yeah, and I know that you're on this path to kind of transition into a new Richard. A new chapter is kind of slowly emerging, and you have quite a lot of our members of Conscious 500 are in this year's program, because they heard it's your last one, at least in this form.
Yeah.
And you have a big tour coming up in the US. But I'm curious if we can share a bit on this chapter now that's coming to an end, and how the new chapter is slowly coming alive, and how that feels for you as a leader of this company also.
Well, I think it's a good moment for any leader or parent, or there comes a time where the child is ready to leave home, And then you have to go through a process of letting go. And so many founders don't do that right. They don't plan it. It comes at them suddenly, or they hang on too long. And I think that it's like, I've always admired those people who hit the top, like sports people, who hit the very top of their game when they're maybe 25 and then retire and go and do something else. And they've got another 10 years in them, but they just retire just at the top. And I'm like, wow, that's such an amazing thing. That Bobby Jones is a great golfer, like the only golfer that ever won the 4 majors ever in 1 year, the Grand Slam they call it. He won the Grand Slam and, I don't know, 25, 24 or something, and then retired and went and became a lawyer and had a family. And you're like, wow, how cool is that? And I think leaving just before you kind of peak, before you peak is a very, knowing where your peak is kind of key. And so for me, it's been clear, like I wanted to find someone I could sort of, a successor, who I could pass my business over to, who I trusted. So I found that person. And so I'm in that process where I'm going to take time to do that right, and transfer it over, as a gift, actually. And it's just the right time, but it's like you can't rush things like that. And so I'm in that process now with my team and figuring out how that's going to work and how do I transfer ownership and all those things and, copyright or rights and all that. And what's going to happen to all my books and how will I continue to write, because I want to continue to write and I want to continue to not so much teach, but I want to continue doing what I love, which is exploring consciousness. But I'd like to do it in a new way. And so it is a really interesting process. And then in that process, I decided I'd like to kind of end this cycle of my life by doing a US tour, doing a 2-month US tour, which is something I just thought, wouldn't that be fun? And so we're going to hire one of those big rock and roll buses and we're going to go around with the Gene Keys around American cities and towns, and we've got a route planned out the end of 2027. And I just thought, wouldn't that be a great finale for me of this phase? And as soon as I've sort of surrendered to this and I've started to talk about it, as soon as I started sharing it, my team were like, okay, let's figure out how we can help this work, and let's work out the timing and be realistic and generous to each other so that we can manage this transition and what's it going to look like. But as soon as I've done that, a whole new transmission started to arrive in me, like whole new, I don't know, like I'm opening up beyond the Gene Keys, into perhaps the underpinning of the Gene Keys, like the field where it came from. And I'm exploring like much wider sphere of, I don't know, I guess wisdom traditions and combining things in a new way that, perhaps a bit more scholarly. I was a scholar when I was, at university. I was trained in lots of disciplines, but I then became a spiritual person because I had a massive spiritual experience. So I'm now reclaiming some of that, like, wow, that literary knowledge that I had amazing mentors and teachers, at university and stuff, who I learned a huge amount from, and I immersed myself in that world, not so much academic as just very broad understandings of different systems and how they interact. And now my brain has developed in such a way that it just seems to be firing on all cylinders, way more than it ever has. It's like, in my book on contemplation, I call this the mind of light, right? It's a beautiful phrase from Sri Aurobindo, the mind of light. And the mind of light is when the brain starts to, I don't know, it starts to it soars on the wings of the heart. something like that. So the heart opens, love returns, you heal your traumas from your childhood, your wounds, and then the mind opens up on the back of that, and it starts to perceive the kind of multidimensional nature of the universe. It starts to kind of access the field, the genius field, and it starts to see correlations and connections that it never saw before. And I'm experiencing that personally. So I'm creating a lot of new teachings and transmissions. They're not really teachings, they're transmissions. They're explorations into new areas, new subject, complete new subjects. And that I'm fascinated in, weaving scientific stuff with, Neolithic understandings, with how the brain developed, with psychology and literature and poetry, and weaving in so many things that I'm and I'm also constantly learning. It's like I feel like a child again, and I'm really interested in longevity now. It's like one of my new passions. Like, wow, I think we're going to extend our life cycles in the next 20, 30, 50 years. And like, what is that going to look like for humanity? And how are we going, our whole biorhythms are going to shift. And so I've got a whole series I'm preparing, on that subject, on that field, which is really, really interesting. And it's not just thinking, it's actually somatic. It's like, these are things that coming primarily through feelings, and then I'm exploring them, through understandings. So, yeah, a rich time I'm entering into.
Yeah, it's so powerful to acknowledge when you already know deep inside that the chapter is gonna end, and then having the awareness to communicate that, first of all, to yourself, make peace with it, or probably your wife or whoever you're with in your relationships, and then communicating it to the team, I think is such a good example of conscious leadership, because it's the truth. And from the truth, it builds more trust with everyone, and then everyone can adapt to it. And it's also honoring the founder, the original creator, and it's the maturing of the business as an entity in itself that's ready to, be nurtured by a whole other crew, and another torch holder. Like,
I think so.
Yeah,
I think it really. I think it's a good stage in any person's evolution or a business evolution that new voices. The founder steps back and new voices emerge. In the collective, which is just like, I can't imagine anything more blissful for me.
Yeah.
To see, like, wow, and to learn from those new voices, and to listen and see that, because when one person steps back, more will come up. It's not that I'm stepping back, I'm actually stepping in more deeply, but it will allow a lot more voices to come forth, I think.
And did you already make peace with, let's say, this new chapter has started, and there's the successor, and Jinkies takes direction that it will be different than when you would have been the same person holding the torch? Like, have you made peace with how that could become, or how do you deal with that? How does that interesting?
I think the trick is you have to find someone with more integrity than you. Right? That's always like, that's quite easy for me, actually. But like, I found my guy, it's like I found someone who I know has absolutely impeccable integrity. He would not be comfortable with me saying that, but necessarily, but it's true. And so knowing that, I know that I don't need to worry that any decisions that he makes with his team, whatever his team is, I know will be they'll be the right decisions. They might not be the decisions I have made, because they'll be made in a different context that I won't fully understand. And he's 15, 20 years younger than me, so it's like it's a different generation, and it's a different world. And it's really important, I think, for people when, like me, where I'm approaching 60 in the next couple of years, like recognizing what elderhood looks like, the beginning of elderhood, and claiming it. I need to claim that. And if I'm holding on to my youth or my middle years, I'm not going to be able to go 100% into that next phase and really fully explore it. And so my aim is to get to 2028. I've told this to my team. I want to get to the January 2028, and I want nothing in my diary, not even a dentist appointment. My friend said, "Oh, your teeth are going to fall out." I literally want a clean slate to see what happens.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so powerful, yeah. And the feeling already to think about that, there's going to be a lot of walks, I think, next to the River Dart here.
I think my wife will be happy. Yeah, and we have ideas like, a dream like we might buy a farm, which is a crazy thing to do. Most people, when they get to like 60, they're like retiring. I don't, I feel the opposite. I feel like I want a new childhood. I want a full, next few decades. And so, I want to be connected even more to the earth and to community. And, I want to be living in the teachings, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, so beautiful. Yeah. And then, I can imagine that from that experience, like all these other things will have a beautiful place to land and to ground into it for you to create that new chapter. And I was also wondering, like a little bit connecting back to like the Gene Keys and the different offerings, like for people that are listening, like how can Gene Keys be a tool for them in their business? Like I personally apply it to understand better. Like, for example, one of the Gene Keys that I have in my profile is 55, like why I'm here is 55. And then I was listening to the podcast with you and Rick Rubin, where 30 minutes you were talking together about 55, and it's a big one, big key for humanity. And so maybe you can explain a bit with that one as an example of how people could, make their own profile and see how it can help themselves as a leader and also the team, and seeing how you can blend those insights together.
Yeah, it's Gene Keys is in one level, it's a little bit of a trick, right? Because what it does is it tricks you into your own wisdom, right? That's its purpose, love wisdom, to trick you into your own wisdom. And so it looks very complex. So when you get your profile for the first time, you're looking at it, there's all these words, and you're like, I can't make any sense of this, But then you get the book and you begin to read your Gene Keys, or you listen to your audios, and then slowly what you're doing is you're imbuing various levels of views of yourself. So you're seeing yourself this is me at the shadow playing out these patterns. And you might see, like, the pattern might be, if it's Gene Key 55, it might be a victim pattern, and you might not have seen that before. You might realize, wow, there's an area in my life where I have been playing the victim unconsciously. I was blaming that thing, or I was blaming the government, or I was blaming that person for this miserable thing, or I was blaming my birth, or I was blaming something, and I'd made myself into a victim, right? And I didn't even know that program was running in my unconscious. And so that key that's an example of how that particular key can point you towards something that you hadn't seen previously. And the moment you see it, it starts to change. It starts to loosen, because the pattern can no longer hold so clearly. It might run on for a while, but it's going to become more and more uncomfortable now you can see it. So you're going to let it go. And then you're going to start finding freedom, which is the higher aspect of that Gene Key. Is like you start to feel freedom, more freedom, because you realize that the pattern was actually inside your brain. It wasn't that other person, or it wasn't the thing you were blaming. It was you. You were holding something against yourself, And so once you grub out the roots of those shadows, you feel more free. And that particular Gene Key is as you said, it's a really important one, because in the framework, the Gene Keys are lots of layers to them. And one of the layers is you can use them to map global cycles. So you can look at them individually in your profile, but you can also use the same tools to map large global cycles, a bit like the ancient Vedic Indians map these things called the yugas, 24,000-year cycles, right? And you can use the Gene Keys in that way. And what you see as a pattern is you see certain keys coming in at certain years. And so in the year 2027, Gene Key 55 clicks in to play, and in a major theme, and it hasn't changed since the 1600s, right? So from the 1600s to now, there has been a certain program running, and the program that's been running is building complexity and systems and cities and civilizations. And that's basically what happened since the 1600s, since the sort of end of the Middle Ages. And then we went into this massive growth curve, this where time seems to speed up. And now we've arrived at like AI, which is the peak of that process of building systems. And then when the gene key comes in at this moment, the programming shifts of consciousness, right? And that means that it's almost like, a super tanker has been running at a certain speed, and then you switch the engines off, and the weight and the momentum keeps going, right, until it stops eventually. And that's us reaching 2027. It's like we've been going in a certain direction, and all the predictions that we're making and the linear thinking are based on the last 400 years. Like, this is how it's been. And we assume it's going to carry on in the same direction. So we're like, we're going to then get AI, then we'll get robots, then we'll go to Mars, then we'll do that's all the linear thinking projecting from the last 400 years. But when you look at the patterns through the gene keys and you see 55 coming in, it is not pointing towards that. It's a very different energy when you look at it, because it's not that one alone. It's actually a series of gene keys, which are archetypes, mythic archetypes. But when you look at them and you analyze them, you realize they're actually a break in the pattern. They are absolutely the opposite of the pattern we've been in. So what does that look like? It means that something is going to fall apart, And of course, it doesn't happen overnight. It's not like it happens in 2027. It's already happening now. It's been happening for decades. We've been coming up to that point, and then the engines get switched off around that time, and then it peters out, and the new pattern starts to emerge, and the new pattern's already emerging. We can see it in like Conscious 500. We can see it in, lots of different new shoots that are emerging that are much more holistic in their thinking, as opposed to the old hierarchical system building world. And of course, when something's ending, often towards the end, it's almost like it senses its ending. Like the patriarchy almost senses it's coming to an end, and it throws up its wildest aberrations. I'm not going to say any more than that. So it throws up like incredible polarized versions of itself. And so that's what we're seeing. We're seeing like polarized versions of the ending of a phase, of an era. And so it's very, very difficult for us to make predictions or projections beyond 2027, beyond 2028, because we're entering into a new era, and we don't know, we're not yet in the energy of that era. It's just sort of bleeding through. We can, if you're intuitive, if you're listening, if you're deeply in your feminine side, you can feel it coming. You might even have a really good sense of what it's going to look like. But the old one also has to crumble. And that transition period can be ugly, because it can be scary. Because what has held us up and held us together as a civilization across the world are things we take for granted. The Amazon thing just arriving when we click the button, that may not be the case anymore. We may think, it's going to arrive by drone, but that may not be the case anymore. What I see when I look at the patterns is I don't see a continuity. I actually see, a break. I see a kind of a breakdown, a breakthrough. I can conjecture. I might say, well, AI actually is the thing that's going to speed up our demise. Part of it might also help us, might help in lots of areas, but it might also speed up our, climate problem, and it might, which is true at the moment. We don't know. We don't know what will cause that shift. But I'm just a pattern reader, so I read the patterns, and what it looks like is anomalies coming. So it would be very tricky to, if you think that something's going to be the way it is beyond 2028, it's unlikely that it will be the way you think it will be. That's all I can say. When systems change, you have, in systems theory, when systems are undergoing massive stress and they're about to shift to another kind of level of frequency, you have things arriving in the system called strange attractors. This is like physics and cosmology. And strange attractors are like, they're a heightened, basically as more randomness comes into the scene, more unpredictability, more unpredictable leaders are more, we know who they are, right? More unpredictable behavior, more strange attractors. Strange attractors are not bad things. They're symbols that a system is about to go through a breakthrough, right? But more of them appear towards the end, and they can get more and more extreme because they're signs that the system is undergoing a massive, it's about to go through a wormhole. So we don't really know. I don't know. None of us know what that's going to bring. I kind of have this, through Gene Key 55, I have this term called the crystalline human. And my US tour, that's the name of my US tour at the end of next year. Crystalline human, it's the future human, what we might look like. Not like a few years down the road. I'm talking like over the next 100 years. Because evolution changes slowly, and very, very fast in terms of bigger cycles, but lifetimes, it's a decade by decade process. But in this time, when things change very quickly, you get the sense that the time is speeding up, towards the end of one of these cycles. It's called a hyperbolic curve, and a hyperbolic curve has been noted by, again, in fact, I think there was a group of scientists that looked at the patterns over the last 100 years of civilization speeding up and tracked this hyperbolic curve, and they tracked it to 2026, and they said that's the 0 point. They did that in the 1960s. It was a group of scientists and mathematicians. And the hyperbolic curve is a curve that gets steeper and steeper as it gets towards the end. And so they said in 2026, we don't know what's going to happen. They called it the apocalypse year. Right? None of us know, but it's funny that they found that same year. So 2026, 2027, some big shift. But the experience is that time is speeding up because the curve gets sharper and sharper and sharper. And so the experience is that technology is also speeding up. The curve gets sharper and sharper, and it gets more like AI is exactly that hyperbolic curve because it's exponential in how quickly it learns and changes and could change us. So, and I'm not, by the way, saying AI is good or bad. I'm just saying it is part of this story, this narrative. Anyway, I didn't think I was going to go down that wormhole, but
It's a good one. Yeah, love it.
if you're in business, it does mean that you're going to your business has to be incredibly agile. If you think you can make a plan beyond 2027, you need to think again.
I think that's a beautiful bridge to hear how you would lead a company through this transition, and you are doing it. So I think one of the elements is, like you said before, you're deciding to pass on the torch, and that's probably some intuition.
Pass the buck.
Good luck, bro. No, but you're kind of sensing it probably intuitively that it's this younger generation is gonna be ready for this change in this specific business entity, and you're stepping into the next chapter. But how would you advise people based on your visions and
Well, and I'm going to be around as well,
Yeah.
disappearing. I'm going to make sure I am available, and I would, it's what I said. You have to. One of the things that when I first understood something about business, I came up with this saying, which is, if you're designing a business, don't design your business to succeed, design it to meet your needs. And that's a really big mistake everyone makes, mostly everyone, because everyone designs businesses to succeed. But that doesn't meet your needs often. You know, your needs are often less than you think. What are your actual needs? What do you want in life? Do you actually really need, you know, $1 billion or even $1 million? Like, what do you really need? You need a good relationship. You need I need a peaceful life. I want to live somewhere I love with, you know, I want to have kids or not, or, you know, you actually have to think about what your needs are and you design your business around that. And it's a very different kind of business that you will design. You might design a business that actually kind of has an ending. You know, that's a great business plan to have. Like, ask yourself in your next kind of vision meeting, how do we want this to end? How do we want this business to end? It's a brilliant question. What is the dream of this ending of this business? And then you work back from there. Even if it's in like 100 years, right? You might go, well, ideally it would end in like 50 years. And then, but it's done this, and it's served this community and these people, and it's helped solve these problems. And you're being realistic. And then you like design its trajectory based on that, instead of this blind kind of madness that it's going to go on forever. It's our human disease. We think we're going to live forever. We don't. Business isn't going to live forever either, because the system is going to change. So I think it's really good to think about those things. Like, I think we're going to have to think more and more about simplicity. And that's a great challenge for businesses, because they're so complicated. So how can you make the simplest business possible? You know, that's a great conundrum. And Elijah, my friend who's taking over from me, he once said, the path to simplicity usually travels through complexity. I think that was a very wise thing, you know. And so you have to kind of go through the complex bit, and then you come back and you're like, okay, how do we now make this simple again? And it's a journey, you know, but maybe someone can actually make it simple from the beginning. But the simplest of you probably wouldn't start in the first place.
Yeah. That's what,
You know.
yeah. There's a lot of fun also in like going through the wild woods, you know, and kind of chopping your way through it, figuring out some kind of path, like, oh, this is kind of a pathway, and then, whoa, a bit too far in, like the swamp, a little bit back.
Learn a lot.
And then you tell people, oh, this is pretty nice here, and like they join, and then it, at some point it will regrow again into something else. And then, so I think it's so beautiful to look so far ahead and acknowledge the fact that everything has a death and a rebirth, and because then the intention and the energy of the creation will be way different than kind of blindly, which is a form of unconscious leadership, and we're constantly learning to become more conscious. But like, what's the point actually also, right? It's not real responsibility. It's more reactive than responsible leadership. So I love that.
Yeah, it's even like what would happen if this business got smaller, you know?
Yep.
It became smaller and simpler, but it still fed, you know, the same families, you know, and it met their needs. But the business itself became much simpler. That's a really great conundrum. How can you design a business like that? You know, so it's very efficient. You know, so it's hyper efficient. But yeah, that's a challenge. That's not an easy thing.
Yeah, it's because it's again, I think this programming of the old system and the paradigm of this growth, and growth is good, and you need to keep growing and expanding. And for example, with Conscious 500, one of the elements we're designing is 500 members max as kind of the core group, you know. And then someone said, what if we do 500 in each continent or each country? You get way more money. And I was like, oh, maybe, but it kind of feels nice. I think 500 people is already a lot, and I think 500 people contained and that are intentionally co-creating this new paradigm together in business is way more than enough, and it's also manageable and way more doable, and I think therefore more fun in the creation of it. So it's
like it's like the 7 birds, the 8 birds, you know, that we're saying about that in a murmuration of birds, or that, which is 500,000 birds that all move as one. You know, only 7 or 8 are actually in communication with each other, but that node of birds is in connection with every other node. And so there's a number, It's like in a human community, there's a number where the community functions best. I believe it's around 150.
Yeah, the tribe.
Yeah, exactly. And it grows any larger than that, it starts to become unwieldy and complicated and overflowing, and things, the balances have shifted. So like, what is the perfect size? You have to figure that out, that meets your needs, and the needs of the people you love.
Yeah. I love that, because it feels like this age of these extreme like unicorns. They even call it unicorns, right? It's sort of like it wants to kind of balance itself more out. So it means a lot of companies need to kind of scale down, or they will probably be pushed by the energies to scale down or innovate into that. And then some other smaller ones, I think, that are more purposeful and intentional will grow by nature, because the natural energies will tune into it and the collective consciousness will tap into it. So I feel like that's more like a natural ecosystem in the business world that I can see come alive more and more.
Yeah, and I think, with AI, there's this incredible retro movement back to basics, simplicities, lo-fi technology, bespoke craft, skills, really good, handcrafts and things again, and well-made, handmade things, So it's, we are going back. There's a movement where we're going back to simpler times and simpler things, and it's not that we go all the way back. And I think the way ahead is a combination always of both. But I do wonder whether, there's an AI version, for example, that is low tech, and I think that people are experimenting with that now. So not centralized, massive, big thing that's just owned by one person or one company, but localized AI networks that don't have as much, they don't cost as much, they don't take as much from the environment. They still provide, the skills and the efficiencies at a local level that you need. Maybe it's, here's how here's the knowledge of how to repair your solar system, and simple things like that, or how to build a new one, simple things that it can help you. But you don't need to have the whole to know, how the World Bank works, or see, it's like you don't need all that information. So you only need what you need to thrive. So it's like, I'm interested in that, like, wonder what the future, the kind of lo-fi future looks like.
Yeah.
Who knows?
It's kind of like
more revolutionary.
Yeah, designing the AIs. Designing the AIs in ways where we prompt them in a way where it's more than enough. Also, like simplifying the way how we instruct the AIs to co-create with us. Basically saying to the AI, like, go for a walk next to the river Dart, like, I don't need to know, it's TMI, it's too much information. Like, our brains cannot handle all this stuff. Way too much. So then, like, kind of saying, it's enough, and just this answer, and slowly giving the information instead of, because it will keep going otherwise. Yeah, it's just overwhelming.
And we become addicted.
It's too much, no.
Yeah, I was thinking, because we were talking about, should we have an AI in our Gene Keys app that's coming out, and we are uncomfortable with AI on many levels. Not, but because of the energy really that it uses, and the environment and the earth and and so I was thinking, like, well, we could have one but it only gives you like 5 questions a day you can ask. Right, you're only allowed 5 questions. So you got to make your questions really good, like really important, dialed, and then it just tells you, go and contemplate, go for what you can figure this out yourself, and so then it actually becomes a tool to enhance your contemplation. That's a good use.
That's epic. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, because then
it's that kind of thinking that I think is needed.
Yeah, it takes it more into consideration. And it improves like your own development and your own thinking and sensing and feeling, and And I have like one more question, because I see this little shining key on your jacket. I'm curious what that is actually. Why is it always on there, or what?
Well,
Like a key?
no, actually,
Or
yeah, funnily enough, it's not a gene key. It's my family business. I don't know if you know this. Like, my family business legacy is it's a wine and spirit business called Berry Brothers in Rudd in London. It's a very famous old business. It's one of the 50 oldest businesses in the world, and it's in 1698. Right, the business was developed, and it's in Piccadilly, in London. And this is the front. This is the replica of the key to Number 3 St James's, which is the address of opposite St James's Palace of our wine merchants. There's a wine shop, very very old wine shop. If anyone's listening to this, and you're passing through London, go and have a look in it. It's pure Dickensian. It's like going back into 300 years, and it's been kept as it was. And it's the tourist things go past, and they tell the story of of the shop and how it emerged, and the famous people that went there, and all of that. And it's an incredible business, family business that's been going for over 300 years. And I learned a lot from sitting in the boardrooms in that business as an owner, as a part owner of that business, as a shareholder, I should say. And so for years I've been learning from a much bigger business than my own. I mean, it's not it's a medium-sized business, but it's a very very iconic British brand. And I also learned a lot from how do you keep a business going that long? How do you keep thriving? And so there are ingredients in there that I've learned a lot from my ancestors. And there were two families, the Rudds and the Berries. And part of that is wow, you really have to get along well to survive 2 world wars, all the craziness, the internet explosion, all of it. How do you keep going that long? Yeah, my sister's in the chair currently, so I still have a lot of involvement, and I'm interested, and I'm a lover of wine, of fine wine. So that's what that key is. But yeah, it's a nice parallel to Gene Keys in a way, because it's a business that's about excellence, and it's about relationships, and it's about longevity, and those are all the things I'm interested in.
I love it. Yeah. And then maybe last question about this, because we are also noticing within Conscious 500 that we're connecting to more and more family offices, and especially the next gen of the family offices, they're more around conscious leadership as well, and this is a family business, So what do you see as patterns that have worked well in transitioning in these new times with consciousness rising, and having those conversations with the families that are maybe more embedded or have been born into these older paradigms, and how to build that bridge? What do you see, and what do you think would be powerful?
It's to say that, they're having to really innovate. Old paradigm businesses are not going to survive the change. And this is wine and spirits, right? So, and alcohol consumption is dropping, and young people. And so you cannot rely on that. And it's a bespoke wine merchant anyway. So it's top tier stuff. It's the very best wines and stuff. So it's a slightly different category from, just purveyors of wine to everyone. But you can't rely on anything in that world either. And the climate is also hugely challenging for wine growing regions. And so it's all about values in that business. If you hear my sister talking online and various things that she appears in, 'cause she's a really interesting female leader in a male dominated previously world, she talks almost always about values and principles. And we became, we're one of the oldest businesses to become a B Corp, which is a commitment you make to, ethical excellence and, lowering your carbon footprint and all those kind of things. And It's those are our values, and if you stay true, it's like I said earlier, if you stay true to your values, then that's how you keep that longevity going. Because the values are the only thing that remains in the changing world. Like, all your strategies are going to have to change. Your product line may change. You may end up doing all kinds of different things. You may move country. You may move. It's like I said to my sister, who knows whether London will be underwater in 50 years' time. So what's our wine shop that's 300 years old going to do? Are we going to where the next level of vine's going to be planted? There's a saying in the wine world that the best time to plant a new vineyard is 30 years ago. Right? So why we need to be asking now, where are the new vineyards? A lot of wine growers are asking that. Like, where should we're planting in Scandinavia or in other, it's not the best, but it's like making the best of, it's thinking ahead, thinking outside the curve, outside the box, thinking a whole generation or two down the line. That's what is going to help businesses, when you can think that far ahead. And values is the only thing you've got that won't change. So, yeah, you got to really firm in on those. Stay true to them.
Yeah, love it. Yeah. And it's beautiful because it's intrinsically connected to your own personal values, and which, again, the Gene Keys help to reflect on, and especially the new work. I'm so looking forward, and your new book, the Sage is coming out. And
Yeah.
because I think it's the perfect timing actually for the transition we're in, for people to then really wake up from it and start to see it, because there are enough opportunities to ride this wave in a way where it's going to be beneficial and actually kind of calm if you do it in the right way, I believe, even though all the craziness is happening. But if you can be in your center through the storm, it is definitely possible. And I think that's a nice transition to kind of ground the conversation, and maybe share a last little piece about your new book, The Sage, for people that don't know about it yet.
Curious. I'm very excited about it, actually. It's taken me
Finished or almost, or
6 years. I'm 6 years in, and I'm doing the sort of final pass now.
only 6 years? So.
Yeah. I mean, it's my, I gotta, if you're a writer, you kind of have you have a sense when you're doing your magnum opus. This is the one, like the Gene Keys was big and it has its impact, but this is like bigger.
Wow.
And it is a big book as well, but it's about how to live in deep time. I call it deep time. And it's an I Ching. It's my version of the I Ching. It's a kind of a code book of consciousness, as the Gene Keys is, but it is more mythic, more poetic, more multidimensional. It's a book that you will live your life with. It's a book that I don't know. It's very difficult to explain. It has so many layers and dimensions to it. At the simplest level, it's a book you can open on any page randomly, and you're going to get a piece of wisdom, right? But it also operates within an app that is coming out in a month or so, and it also kind of coincides with like a whole kind of repository on the website that helps work with it. It's a bit like, there's that book, A Course in Miracles. It's of that level of intricacy and depth. It's a book you'll work with your whole life. And the idea behind it is it helps you return to the forest consciousness, and it guides you, back into a slower time, and to adapt your life to like deeper rhythms. And that's its only purpose, really. And, and then it's done its job. But it's also, it's a playground, so it invites you to be playful in life. It has no shadow in it. Just like the Gene Keys book describes all the shadows of, this book is for the future human. It's like, I actually kind of wrote it for the transition, whatever's coming in the next few decades. Even if it's an apocalypse, there's a book that will show you what's on the other side. It's showing you the future human without the shadow. This is the possibility of where we could be going, of where we are going, actually. The book's really, really kind of convinced. That's where we're going. Because every bit you read, you can't get a bad piece of advice. It's like, it's always not positive, but it's always inspiring, I think. And it goes, like my brain, across everything I've ever read, every culture I've ever visited, every mystic book or teacher I've ever touched. They're somewhere in that book. There's a whole system of like sub notes, and it's full of wormholes. And I think it's not a light read, but it's powerful. I think it'll have a cult following, I'm sure. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Looking forward to read it once it's out. And I think that's a beautiful way to land this conversation. Maybe a little last words of if any conscious leaders still watching it until this point. Thank you. We love you. What would be one final piece of advice for someone that's now listening, that's building a conscious business or wants to like increase their level of consciousness as a leader? What would you say to them now?
Well, I just think everything we've said, it's going to come back to like really simple principles of, coming back to your intuition, really. Now, I know we have a friend, Nikki Trott, and I was serving tea. I do tea ceremony, right? And I was doing the tea ceremony at one of her business retreats, and I just turned up in the morning with the tea, with like 40 people, and we had this incredible space. But we had a really interesting session on intuition with lots of different business people in the room talking about the importance of intuition. And I think that is where it kind of comes back to, that's like one of the few things you can rely on in times of intense change. And to hear your intuition clearly means you have to slow way down inside yourself, because otherwise you're not going to hear it. If you are manically trying to serve the machine of your business and you can't step outside your business and be quiet, you will not hear the quiet whispers of your intuition that are saying, hey, you need to shift direction. Come this way. And then, like we said, you take those intuitions to the people you trust, and you measure them and you weigh them and you see if they're the correct ones, but you trust it. But you've got to slow down. You've got to be a contemplative person. Otherwise, how are you ever going to get to the wisdom that's inside you? I mean, that's what all my work of the Gene Keys and the Sage all about. Its only purpose is to slow people down enough so that they remember their own wisdom. Trick them into their own wisdom, because it's all here in the body. You don't need any books. You don't need any systems or tools. You just need to go for a walk along the river here, really, on your own, peacefully. Take your problem with you. However long it takes, it'll get resolved. By walking, it is solved. I guess that's my thing. Like, by walking, it is solved. Trust that.
Beautiful. I love it. Thank you so much. Yeah, and for people that want to learn more about your work, of course, we'll put all the links in the show notes. I can imagine the Gene Keys website, but any websites, resources that you would love to share, then that would be nice.
Yeah. I think it's the website, and I'm on Instagram a bit nowadays. Randomly in the mornings.
How was this morning? And then the work, I was like, have you noticed that?
Yeah, I did a second one.
Okay.
And then they figured it out for me.
Okay, good. Yeah.
I'm not very good on social media. I don't really have a big social media presence.
But I'll make a few reels for you about this podcast.
You can send me some instructions.
Yeah.
I have a good team who show me.
Yeah.
But I'm more of an off-grid guy. Yeah.
Beautiful. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Richard.
Yeah, thank you.
And looking forward to see all your beautiful new revelations come to life, and hope to keep co-creating together in the most beautiful way. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Conscious 500 podcast. Today here live in Devon with Richard Rudge, the founder and creator of the Gene Keys. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. It means the world to us, because it really helps to keep building these amazing episodes for you with the most inspiring leaders in the world. Thank you, and let's keep elevating business for good together.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Conscious 500 podcast. It means the world to us if you hit subscribe and spread the word about this episode. In 2026, we will have 5 in-person experiences. Lumina at the summer solstice in Norway, Harmonia with the fall equinox in Greece, our annual Symbiosis will this time be in Mexico, and Noctura during the winter solstice in Belgium. If you feel called to join Conscious 500 and our upcoming events, please go to conscious500.com. Join us on the mission to elevate business for good.